Welcome to this special report. I'm Mike Adams, the Health Ranger. This is about glyphosate, the history of it, and how it is part of the military-industrial agricultural complex. And this is why Trump's recent executive order specifically talked about the need to stockpile phosphorus for weapon systems such as white phosphorus and other weapons. He specifically mentioned incendiary devices, and you might wonder, well, what does a weed killer have to do with weapons, and why did Trump's executive order from February 18th, why did it specifically place control of glyphosate and phosphorus under the Secretary of War? Interesting questions, right? Well, in order to answer that, you have to trace things back all the way to the 1930s. So now we're going back to IG Farben, which was the big corporate conglomerate of Nazi Germany at the time. And remember that IG Farben was hauled before the courts in Nuremberg, and it was ultimately split up by the courts into three companies because IG Farben had committed crimes against humanity, including the Zyklon B gassing and experiments on human prisoners. And, this is a corporation that took part in the Holocaust. So we know that IG Farben is part of the history of using these phosphorus-based chemicals to commit mass genocide, and in that case, against specific ethnic groups. And then we know that IG Farben was, of course, split up into three corporations. That was Bayer, yeah, the same Bayer that exists today, the pharmaceutical company. It was BASF, BASF, which is, of course, the massive chemical conglomerate that it's a giant manufacturer of chemicals in Germany and now in China. But what you may not know is that the third corporation that IG Farben was split into was known as Hoechst. Remember, these are German corporations. That's why they're named as German names. But Hoechst merged with another company a few years later to form Aventis, which then merged with Sanofi to become what is now known as today Sanofi, a leading pharmaceutical company. So, in other words, the IG Farben corporate conglomerate that carried out crimes against humanity, two out of the three corporations that it was split into are now pharmaceutical companies. Now, one of the leading scientists there in the 1930s is named Dr. Gerhard Schrader. He was a chemist at IG Farben, and he was able to synthesize a class of compounds known as organophosphates. So when you hear organophosphates, take note that the phosphate obviously is a molecular form of phosphorus. So organophosphates are known as OPs, and there are a great many pesticides and herbicides that exist today in the marketplace that are organophosphate chemicals. Now, I should clarify that it wasn't just Dr. Gerhard Schrader who discovered organophosphates, but he was the one who then discovered a nerve agent called tabun, T-A-B-U-N, tabun. This was discovered in 1936, and it was a nerve agent chemical that very aggressively disrupts the nervous system, and it inhibits acetylcholinesterase. Now, acetylcholinesterase is, of course, it's an enzyme that's involved in neurology. It's critical for cognitive function in everybody. And right now, when people eat a lot of pesticides, one of the reasons that they suffer from dementia and Alzheimer's is because of these acetylcholinesterase inhibitors, which are really nerve agents that have been turned into pesticides and herbicides. And if you are exposed to a high enough concentration of tabun, then you will suffer paralysis and death. Now, Gerhard Schrader, a chemist, he wanted to continue his work into death chemicals. So he kept working on it, and then in 1938, he developed sarin gas. This sarin compound was found to be 10 times more toxic than taboon. And then, and you may recall, by the way, sarin gas was what was released in the Tokyo subway attacks. When was that? Back in the 1990s, I think it was. Anyway, sarin gas was followed by another nerve agent called Soman, S-O-M-A-N. That was in 1944. And then these were all classified as G-series agents. They were all nerve agents, chemical weapons, which were further weaponized by Nazi Germany. But they were not deployed by the Nazi regime in World War II. However, note that through Operation Paperclip, the United States of America brought many of these German scientists to the United States and gave them new identities, new passports, new names even, in many cases. And then the Americans continued this research on nerve agents, and they developed VX nerve gas in conjunction with the British, I should add. So VX nerve agents, and it can be in a gaseous form or it can be in a liquid form. It's kind of like an oil. It acts like a lipid, so it can stick to a lot of surfaces. Well, VX, this toxic agent, is lethal to humans at microgram doses. So if you just put, less than a drop, I'm talking about, a thousandth of a drop on your finger, roughly, give or take, that's enough to kill you. Now remember, this has everything to do with where glyphosate came from, because it was the development of these nerve agents and different ways to kill people that resulted in further research, roughly in about 1970, that resulted in glyphosate being developed and then introduced into the marketplace around, I think, 1974. Now, all these nerve agents that we've mentioned here, sarin or VX or Soman or whatever, these all share, and also glyphosate, these all share a phosphorus atom that's bonded to either oxygen or sulfur or both. So this is the basic molecular formula. So you have to have phosphorus in order to build these weapons to kill either plants or kill people or kill insects. And so the military wants this. This is why Trump is saying, well, we have to have phosphorus for glyphosate. Actually, why Trump wants this, it's more than just glyphosate. It's also in order to have a stockpile of phosphorus to build toxic, illegal chemical weapons, nerve gas agents, and other organophosphates that can be deployed by the military, because the U.S. respects no international treaties against chemical weapons or biological weapons, obviously, or even nuclear weapons proliferation, which is evidenced by the fact that the U.S. gave Israel nuclear weapons that are still undeclared and still illegal under U.S. law. So the phosphorus core, this is the common molecular factor that connects glyphosate with VX nerve agents and other organophosphate toxic chemicals. And that's why I have grouped all of this under the military, industrial, agricultural complex, because they all have the same basic core. They're very similar chemicals. In fact, you could say that glyphosate is a nerve agent for plants. It's a nerve agent for plants. And all of these work by disrupting the nervous system through, acetylcholinesterase inhibition. So ACHE is how that's designated in the scientific papers. Glyphosate doesn't kill you immediately. Glyphosate kills you slowly. So the effects of glyphosate are really chronic and cumulative and even degenerative on human physiology, whereas just micrograms of VX would kill you completely. So one of the reasons why glyphosate is used on the food supply is because they can saturate the food supply, they can kill people slowly over time, and nobody notices that they're eating poison every time they take a bite of non-organic wheat or bread or hamburger buns or, wheat crackers or wheat cereal or what, or corn, wheat, oats. Glyphosate is sprayed on so many things, and it's sprayed as a desiccant. It's not even sprayed on wheat to kill weeds. It's sprayed on wheat to dry it quickly in the fields. Now, as further proof of this, there was also a pesticide based on the organophosphate structure called Amiton, Amiton. And this Amiton pesticide was later found to be so extremely toxic that it was withdrawn from the marketplace. But this Amiton gave rise to VX chemicals. So again, the pesticide industry and the chemical weapons industry are essentially one and the same. Just like the vaccine industry and the biological weapons industry are also one and the same. They're just different points of view of the same research into how to kill lots of people. That's the critical point you need to understand here. This is about how to kill people. So in the UK, there was a Porton Down laboratory. Porton Down. Another laboratory is called Edgewood Arsenal in the United States. Both of these labs weaponized organophosphate compounds. During the Cold War, roughly in I think it was the mid-1950s or late 1950s, they found then that this was related to pesticides, and the British government introduced or approved a pesticide called Tetram, Tetram. And this Tetram pesticide was found to be a precursor to VX out in the field. So they would spray Tetram on the crops, and then some small amount of the Tetram would become a VX nerve agent. And then farm workers all across the UK were found to be collapsing with nerve agent type of symptoms. This is well documented. And then continuing the organophosphate pesticides, then further research was conducted, and it gave rise to compounds like chloropyrifos and malathion, which, as you know, has been sprayed on cities such as Miami in order to, as they say, to bring down the mosquito population. Malathion is molecularly very similar to sarin gas. So it's a nerve agent. So when your government is spraying your city and your neighborhood with malathion, what they're actually doing is they are spraying you with chemical weapons that are organophosphate chemicals that cause acetylcholinesterase inhibition in your brain. So you're actually being gassed like you were in a giant open air gas chamber. Now, the EPA banned chloropyrifos in 2021, but that was only after there was just an insurmountable amount of evidence that linked it to neurological development disorders in children. And there were a lot of activists, a lot of attorneys, legal groups that were fighting the EPA to take that off the market. Now, back to glyphosate. This was developed by Monsanto roughly around 1970. And this molecule, which is a very small molecule, and it permeates everything. It moves through biological systems. It mimics the phosphorus-based action of nerve agents, but it targets plant enzymes instead of the acetylcholinesterase enzymes in human and primate systems. But a lot of studies link glyphosate to disruptions in the gut microbiome, and they've also found that it chelates certain minerals, causing mineral deficiencies in many people. And of course, glyphosate has been linked to non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and a great many other health conditions that I'll cover in another separate report. So to summarize this so far, glyphosate is you could say it's a nerve agent for plants. It targets plant enzymes, whereas VX and sarin and malathion and so on, these are nerve agents for humans. But glyphosate's toxic effects impact humans in ways other than targeting the human nervous system, but they share the common chemical ancestry. They were all developed to kill. And that's what you need to understand, that the corporations and the scientists and the governments, such as Nazi Germany, that are behind all of this, these are organizations and people that focused on making money from killing things, killing people, killing insects, killing plants, killing human populations. So those are the truthful origins of where all this came from. All right, so if we compare the actions of nerve agents versus glyphosate, there are some important differences. So if you look at sarin and VX, they bind to acetylcholinesterase, and you can't unbind them. So they bind to acetylcholinesterase, and they cause what's called cholinergic crisis, which is it results in seizures because your nervous system stops functioning, you have respiratory failure, and then you suffocate to death. Now, you can survive if you're injected with antidotes like atropine, which is known to emergency responders and maybe some chemists who work in these labs. You get a drop of sarin on you. You better have some atropine available. You better start injecting yourself within seconds. All right, so Gulf War syndrome, which of course impacted tens of thousands of veterans in the 1991 Gulf War and beyond, found that these veterans were exposed to sarin-based pesticides or organophosphate pesticides. They suffered chronic neurodegeneration. They suffered autoimmune disorders and mitochondrial damage. Some of that may have been linked to all the vaccines they were given, and soldiers continue to be given vaccines. But it's also clear that there were a lot of things sprayed around them, on or around their bases, and also used as weapons deployments against the enemies. And some of that blew back onto U.S. soldiers, causing, it's believed, Gulf War syndrome, which is really sort of nerve agent light. It's like, well, you've been hit by nerve agents, but you didn't die. But you're going to have brain damage, you're going to have neurodegeneration, etc. So that's what happens when people are exposed to these pesticides and malathion over time. It breaks down their brains. And this is part of what's happening in our country today. It's why there's a great dumbing down in America, or at least that's part of it, because people's brains are actually being damaged by the spraying of these things. Now, let's compare that to a chronic toxicity of glyphosate. So glyphosate, remember, doesn't target the acetylcholinesterase inhibitors. Rather, it causes things like, I already mentioned, the gut microbiome disruption. It kills beneficial bacteria. It promotes leaky gut syndrome. It worsens the risk of autoimmune disorders. It causes endocrine disruption. It mimics estrogen in some cases. It's been linked to breast cancer, reproductive disease, and infertility, even at very low doses. Glyphosate is capable of bioaccumulation, not just in living systems, but also in water supplies, specifically in groundwater. But it can move through the food supply, and since almost all the crops that are fed to animals are sprayed with glyphosate, I'm talking about cattle feed, for example, then the cows are going to be heavily laced with glyphosate as well. So how is glyphosate even legal? How did it get approved by the EPA for use in the food supply? So it's very clear that the EPA, of course, has been captured by the military, industrial, agricultural complex. I'm trying to remember what I named it. The EPA is called regulatory capture. The EPA has been captured by the pesticide, herbicide companies like Bayer and many others. The EPA, it's now known, deliberately ignored warnings about the carcinogenicity of glyphosate. And they knew it was a probable carcinogen. And even the IARC classified it as that in 2015. But the EPA ignored that because they wanted to protect agricultural profits. In the military, there was also a lot of secrecy about the related compounds, such as sarin gas, and there were human experiments conducted in the UK that resulted in the deaths of RAF servicemen, one of them named Ronald Madison in 1953. I'm just checking my notes here on that. But yeah, they were running human experiments, exposure, to see if it would kill people, and turns out it did. Also, in the summer, if you are using DEET, that's DEET, which is an anti-mosquito chemical, and people in America, they spray DEET all over their skin. You've probably done so. It's an insect repellent. Well, guess what? It's an organophosphate derivative, It also causes acetylcholinesterase inhibition, just like sarin gas, but at a lower dose. And DEET is, you can go buy it at the grocery store or Walmart. So we literally have nerve agents that are sold over the counter all across America that are labeled safe, and people use them. They spray themselves with those things. Just as a side note, my online store, healthrangerstore.com, has a natural essential oils based insect repellent. It's called Bugs Away. And it's not quite as effective as DEET, but it also doesn't poison your brain. In fact, it smells wonderful, and you can use it on your skin and your clothes and whatever. So, as the summer gets closer or the spring rolls in here, if you want safe, natural insect repellents, consider supporting us, healthrangerstore.com. And you'll also be doing yourself a favor by not poisoning your brain. That sounds good. So back to the story here, the whole pattern in all of this is that glyphosate and DEET and malathion, which are in common widespread use across our society today, these are all nerve agent weapons in terms of their origin. They're marketed as safe for consumer products. And Trump even said that glyphosate makes food crops healthy, which is unbelievable that someone could say that. But all of these have their origins as warfare toxins or chemical weapons that were specifically designed initially by Nazi scientists to kill people. That's where these come from. The most toxic nerve agents can kill people within minutes. Glyphosate kills people much more slowly over time through systemic damage. But in both cases, these are all enabled by regulatory negligence or regulatory capture and, corporate malfeasance. The corporations, as long as they're making money off of this, Monsanto was making Agent Orange and the military was buying that to drop it all over Vietnam, etc. As long as they're making money on these products, they don't care who it kills. They don't care. So what are the action items that you should take away from this? Well, number one, if you eat GMOs in the food supply, and remember, they're hardly even labeled anymore. All that's required legally in America is just to say, well, this is made with bioengineered ingredients, and it's very tiny print that is hidden on the food label. If you're eating GMOs, you're eating glyphosate, you're eating nerve agents, period. Again, if you're eating GMOs, you're eating nerve agents. If you're eating non-organic food, you can assume that it's laced with glyphosate. Because again, they use it in corn and wheat and many other products and oats and all kinds of grains. So it's in there at some level. We've seen bread products with 191 parts per billion. And we've also seen products that have much lower levels, like beer might have 5 parts per billion. And personally, I'm not so concerned about low single digits, okay? So like 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 parts per billion, not that concerned about it because you can't avoid 100% of it. But where I get concerned is when it starts to get into the tens of parts per billion, or especially in the hundreds of parts per billion. For me, that's when red alarms start going off in my mind. So avoid GMOs. The easiest way to do that is to buy organic. There's also the non-GMO project that's out there. However, the non-GMO project does not require glyphosate testing. At least that's my understanding. That's what their policy was the last time I checked. If they've changed it, then, correct me on that. But I don't believe they require glyphosate testing at all. In fact, I'm quite confident of that. We do glyphosate testing in our laboratory. And I'm going to show you a short video here that's just our glyphosate instrument, which is a triple quad mass spec made by Waters. And I recently posted a lab tour video. I'm not going to show the whole thing, but I just want to play 2 minutes or whatever it is about the glyphosate instrument because I want you to see how large this instrument is. It's very expensive. It costs, hundreds of thousands of dollars to purchase. And then the annual maintenance on that machine is about $45,000, I think. That's what's called preventive maintenance on it. $45,000 per year just to run that thing. So, we're paying like $4,000 a month just to maintain the instrument that we use to test glyphosate. And of course, we test all our products. And you can now go onto our store, healthrangerstore.com. And in every product category, or if you search for any product, there's now a new checkbox on the left that says glyphosate tested. If you check that checkbox, it will only show you products that are glyphosate tested, which is almost everything, by the way, in our store. Not knives or whatever, but almost everything is glyphosate tested. So you can now sort by glyphosate testing or heavy metals testing at healthrangerstore.com. But I want to show you this video of our glyphosate testing instrument. So just to summarize here, number one, avoid GMOs and avoid conventional food, that is non-organic food. Buy organic wherever you can, and just as importantly, buy from sources that actually conduct glyphosate testing like we do. And there's not very many that do. In fact, I'm not aware of anybody that does it as much as we do it, because we test every incoming lot. Every product is tested for glyphosate and heavy metals and many other things, as you probably well know. All right. The next thing is, how do you detoxify from glyphosate? Well, here's the hard part of this is that glyphosate is very persistent and it bioaccumulates in your body and it moves easily through tissues. Some people believe that you can use things like fulvic acid to chelate glyphosate. I'm not entirely sure about that. That's a possibility. However, I think the best way to detoxify is to clean up your diet, drink lots of clean water, sweat through exercise and sunlight exposure, and depend on your body's natural detoxification process. You will naturally detoxify if you stop the inputs of glyphosate. So clean up your diet. Stop eating glyphosate. Stop spraying it on your lawn if you're still doing so. Stop eating GMOs, etc. And then your glyphosate levels will fall on their own. And over a period of several weeks, you would have a much lower circulating level of glyphosate in your blood if you were to have it tested. The other thing that you can do is you can join us here, naturalnews.com. You can read about glyphosate on our website. You can demand that our government ban glyphosate or ban all organophosphate pesticides and herbicides, because these are destroying the neurology of the American people. And even though Trump says that glyphosate is good and that it's a what do you call it, a national security critical resource now, that's insane. It's like saying war is peace and freedom is slavery. This is Orwellian. And then, glyphosate is national security. It's insane. Glyphosate is not national security. Glyphosate is a derivative of toxic, deadly nerve agents designed to kill people. That's just a historical truth. So we should ban these. Glyphosate should be banned from use. And some people say, well, then how will we grow food? Because people have been lied to by the glyphosate industry for all these years. Say, oh, well, glyphosate's needed to grow 80% of the food in America. That is not true at all, because glyphosate was only really commercialized in 1974. And I've got scans of newspapers from the 1950s and 1960s, and I assure you, they are filled with ads for grocery stores. And the food was abundant, and it was very affordable. Dirt cheap food, obviously, in the 1950s and 60s. Even if you take into account dollar devaluation, the food was much cheaper, and there was no glyphosate in existence at the time. So we obviously don't need glyphosate to grow affordable food. In fact, food prices have gone up after introducing glyphosate. So food toxicity has gone up, and food prices have gone up. And you know why? Because glyphosate destroys the soils. Just like it destroys the microbiome of your body and your gut, it also destroys the friendly bacteria in the soils. And once the friendly bacteria are destroyed, then you have dead soils. And now you have to treat the farm like a chemical repository. That's why it's just sprayed with endless chemicals, because the soil's dead. So it doesn't promote healthy plant growth. You don't have healthy crops that are drought resistant and that are disease resistant, etc., because you've killed the soil with glyphosate. So the real answer to this is to regenerate the soils, reintroduce microbes, stop spraying all these toxic chemicals and heavy metals on the soils. You got to let some fields rest for a couple of years to bring back the healthy microbiome. You can't do clear-cut monoculture everywhere. The soils have to be able to live in a more natural, organic environment. But that's not the way today's agriculture works, because it's a militarized, chemicalized, agricultural industrial weapons complex, basically, is what we're all living under. And that's why Americans are so unhealthy. That's why so many people are losing their ability to think. That's why so many people are dying from cancer. Well, plus the jabs on top of that, turbo cancers. And this is why people are so unhealthy, because as Americans, we are eating more organophosphates and more glyphosate and taking more jabs than any other population in the world. And we are rapidly becoming the least healthy people in the world. And we pay the highest of anybody in the world for healthcare costs, even though it's clearly not working because we are not the healthiest people. So if you want to make America healthy again, MAHA, even though that acronym is now a total joke, it's almost an insult to our intelligence, because the Trump administration has abandoned every principle that MAHA once claimed to stand for, right? But if you really wanted to make America healthy again, you would ban organophosphates, you would ban glyphosate, and you would encourage regenerative agriculture. And you would also encourage people to grow their own food. Food security doesn't come from the government stockpiling nerve agents. Food security comes from teaching people how to grow their own food. And as luck would have it, we have connected with an amazing teacher of all of this, Marjorie Wildcraft. And her course, called Wartime Homefront Essential Skills, is available right now at brighteonuniversity.com. The course is on sale for just $75, full digital download of all the seminars, all the materials, all the videos and the instructional content of how to grow a huge percentage of your own food in a very small space, even just a tiny backyard, just the size of 2 or 3 parking spaces. You can grow a large amount of your own food without using glyphosate. Marjorie teaches all of this. Again, you can find it at brighteonuniversity.com, and just scroll down. It's right there. It's the second course that's offered. Now, learning to grow your own food, yes, it takes some time, but it's a great investment, because that's the food you can trust. That's the food that doesn't have glyphosate in it. It doesn't have organophosphates in it. It's not toxic, and it's incredibly nutritious. Especially if you allow things to ripen before you pick them, like, tomatoes. They're supposed to get ripe, which increases the nutrient density with nutrients such as lycopene, for example. So growing your food at home, that's the way for America to achieve food security. But that's not the way the Trump administration sees it. They are not encouraging you to grow anything. They're encouraging the country to stockpile nerve agents so they can feed you poison when you're starving, instead of teaching you how to grow your own food. And what does that tell you about the future that's coming for America? A country run by a government that is building concentration camps across more than 20 states. A country that has vastly increased the Pentagon budget, that is building kamikaze Terminator drones that can hunt down and kill people. A country that's stockpiling nerve agents to spray the food crops so that if you are in a food line, the food they give you will slowly kill you. What does that tell you? What does that tell you about our current administration? What does that tell you about the depopulation agenda? What does that tell you about the urgency to learn how to grow your own food, get off grid, get away from the grocery stores as much as you can? See, these are the principles that I've been teaching for decades, and so has Marjorie Wildcraft and many other people I've interviewed. And if you want to stay informed about all of this, here's what you can do. Let me give you some tools. So number 1, you can check out our free book creation engine website at brightlearn.ai. There are hundreds of books there, all free to download, that teach you how to garden and grow food and preserve food, all of it. It's all there. You can also generate your own book completely free if you don't find the book on the topic that you want. That's an AI book creation engine. Again, we have over 36,000 books there now that you can download. Yeah, it's a lot. Secondly, if you want to research anything about glyphosate or organophosphate compounds or VX nerve gas or sarin or whatever, you can use our AI engine called brightanswers.ai. Brightanswers.ai. We've had users issuing millions of prompts over the last few months at brightanswers.ai. It does deep research across millions of pages of scientific documents, published books, articles, transcripts, you name it. It's an incredible engine. It's incredible that it's free, by the way. If you knew what went into it, you would think we should be charging for it. But nope, we're keeping it free, at least for now. So check it out, brightanswers.ai. And then also you can stay up to date on all of this news at naturalnews.com. And you can watch my videos and interviews about this topic and many other topics at brightvideos.com. That's brightvideos.com. Now I want to play for you just my segment from my recent lab video explaining our triple quad mass spec instrument, which is a Waters instrument. It has really unique chemistry, kind of unusual for liquid chromatography. We actually went the LC route on being able to quantitate glyphosate at very low detection limits, sub 5 parts per billion, for example. Using a novel technique, I spent about 18 months working with my fellow chemists to validate this method. It's an incredible method, and it avoids something called post-column derivatization, which is a very crazy, toxic method. We don't have to do that. We can see the glyphosate directly out of the column. But there is some pretty crazy chemistry and some pretty crazy columns, let me tell you. These aren't your standard C18 carbon columns, not even close. Glyphosate goes right through C18, by the way. If you know anything about lab chemistry, you're probably familiar with C18 carbon columns. But glyphosate goes right through it. It doesn't matter what solvents or what gradients, your mobile phase doesn't matter. So I'll show you this video. And remember, shop with us at healthrangerstore.com if you want heavy metals tested and glyphosate tested foods and supplements and personal care products, because we've got the cleanest things in existence at healthrangerstore.com. So enjoy the rest of the video here and keep your life glyphosate free, because you don't want to eat nerve agents. Let's see, what else do we have here? Oh, so this triple quad mass spec here is from a different company. This is from Waters, and this is a beast. So this instrument, I actually worked on this method for 1.5 years to develop this glyphosate quantitation method using a really unique chemistry here. So we don't rely on what's called the post-column derivatization. We don't need to do that. Instead, we use a really unique column, which I'll just show. There it is. This is a very special column, very unusual. It's not a C18 or anything like that. And we have a very unusual chemistry. This column is completely nuked by any alcohols, including methanol. So the entire, the mobile phase and all the chemistry of this instrument has no alcohols in it at all, which is very unusual for any kind of liquid chromatography. The auto sampler is right here. Currently doesn't have any samples. We're not in the middle of a run at the moment. And the reason this is so large is because this is a triple quad mass spec. So it has to draw an extreme vacuum. So it's got a rough pump and it's got a really massive turbine pump inside to dump every last molecule of air that might find its way into the system. And that happens also when you're introducing your sample into the system. It's sucking in air to push an ion stream through the quadrupoles. And that's why it has to pull a strong vacuum. On the screen here, we were just pulling this up. There's a typical peak that you see. There's a calibration curve right there. And these are standards right now. This is not actually a food sample. But when it's live running, you'll see the actual food samples here. Now, let me show you what's behind all of this, a little bit of behind the scenes, because this is kind of cool. This right here is just a UPS. This UPS is necessary to power this machine during any kind of, power glitch. And, these UPSs are thousands of dollars each. Here's the rough pump for this machine. This rough pump is it's incredibly powerful, uses a lot of electricity, pulls a vacuum through this tube right here. And that's why it has to have its own metal reinforcement spiral inside to prevent the tube from collapsing.
Stock up on the long-term storable Ranger Bucket Set. 536 servings of clean organic superfoods for your survival pantry. Certified organic and lab tested for purity. Order now at healthrangerstore.com.